Hello, thank you for joining Workshop 4 of The Black Family, United by History, Restored by Storytelling, brought to you by New York Life. The Association for the Study of African American Life and History, in collaboration with Archival Alchemy, presents this national program that highlights the legacy of Black family reunions while encouraging families of all backgrounds to build and renew their own familial traditions and stories. We encourage you to watch the rest of the videos in this series to learn more about oral storytelling, genealogy, and familial archiving. Once you view all of the videos, you could receive a certificate as a family historian from the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And now, let's get into Workshop 4, Recording Oral Stories, Basics, led by Ryan J. Heathcock. Ryan is a 1993 graduate of Howard University's School of Television and Film Production and specializes in oral history preservation through video documentation. To learn more about Ryan and his work, please read the full bio in the YouTube description. And now, let's get to the workshop. Good day. My name is Ryan J. Heathcock, and I am a professional videographer who specializes in oral history video preservation. I work with the Association for the Study of African American Life and History as their official, unofficial videographer. I have been in association with the association for almost 7 to 8 years now, and I am happy, pleased, and proud of the work that the association has been doing for well over 100 years, and in particular the work that I've been able to do with them as their videographer over the past number of years, helping to video document the great work that this organization is doing, particularly as we look to the future of the organization and its members, individuals like you, and you. And so, welcome to today's discussion on oral history preservation basics. My role today is simply to help walk you through some general understanding of what's, I would say, required with regards to your approach to documenting your family's history as you will become known as the family historian, or in this instance, for the 21st century, the family video historian or videographer. I think where I wanted to begin the conversation today is dealing with a sense of if I'm taking a look back in time, because we are talking about preservation. And if I were to look back at myself 10 years ago, there's a high probability that if I was sitting in your seat listening to me speak about being a video history videographer or a oral history preservationist through video, I would think, what on earth are you talking about? What the heck is this all about? You've already lost me. It sounds like something that doesn't really relate or is somehow above where I intend to be or what I want to do with regards to my life as a lay historian or someone who has a kind of a general, potentially passing interest in video. However, I would like to present to you with several ideas today for your consideration. For example, the reason I am here today is to share with you exactly what I am, why I'm in this line of work, and how my experience may be of help to you in your journey to support you in your work as a history videographer. Now, where to begin? Well, at the beginning. I want to put myself out there so that you can understand that in many ways, or perhaps a lot of ways, I'm no different than you are. With the exception that I did attend Howard University, I did receive a degree in TV and film production. However, even with that educational background, there's no direct bearing on what's actually required for you to be a videographer / historian when it comes to helping to document and cement the history of your family's relationship, your family's history with you and the generations to come with your work, albeit with a camera that you purchase from Best Buy or with your iPhone or your Android phone. Today, technology is on our side when it comes to assisting us with being able to record our history anytime, any place. But again, where do we begin? Well, allow me a few moments, if you will, to give you a bit of insight on my own personal history as it specifically pertains to oral history preservation. As I mentioned moments ago, I did attend Howard University and I did receive a degree in TV production. However, that is something completely separate and apart from my work as a videographer/historian. This line of work is personal, and with regards to how I would advise you to approach it is along the same way. And I'll start with, in the year 2003, 2004, a friend of mine suggested to me that I do some more research into my family's background, particularly on my father's side. Now, it was no family secret that my father was adopted. He was an orphan from World War II, and he was born and left behind in Germany. Well, it just so happened that there was an upwardly mobile, upper middle class African-American family that was based in Washington, D.C., that were unable to have children of their own. And it just so happened that Virgil C. Heathcock received a posting in Germany at the end of World War II, wherein, to make a long story short, he discovered an orphanage. And in this orphanage was my father, Virgil Johannes Heathcock. Well, he came to this country as a 6-year-old. He crossed the Atlantic on a boat and then made his life from 6 years old until his adulthood in Washington, D.C. Now, knowing that he had German ancestry was always present within family lore, whispered, talked about, but I never thought to question my dad on his German heritage. I don't know why, if I was afraid or intimidated, but as a kid, it didn't really come up much, and I really wasn't sure if I was all that interested. But years later, as an adult, I took an interest because there was this opportunity for me potentially to have dual citizenship. And so, to make a long story short, I started doing some digging. And in other words, the quest for knowledge and insight became real to me at a particular age in my life where I had time to sort of take it seriously. And so with some homework, some phone calls, some investigation, ultimately I ended up in Germany with my camera, video documenting my research and my story into my dad's past to see what I could discover. Today we have, all kinds of genetic research materials available to us to get our genealogy through our DNA. But if you are so inclined, as I was, to actually visually get the story, to go and talk to people, to question them, to get a sense of what life was, is, and had been like in a time gone by, this is something that you'll feel on the inside. It becomes personal. So to make a long story short, I did go back to Germany. I did discover that my father had 8 living brothers and sisters, or there's 6. 6 living brothers and sisters. And this was in the year 2007. And so I had 2008. And so I had my camera with me. I video documented the entire experience, my time doing research at the archives. And then when I finally discovered my relatives, my camera was on hand and I'm recording and asking tons and tons of questions. So the journey into oral history video documentation, in my opinion, is one that I feel and would encourage you all to take it as a personal quest, a personal exercise in cementing your family's history for all time. Because this is your opportunity. And if it was meant for someone else to do it, they'd be doing it. But here you are, listening to me discuss how you can become just like me or anyone else who happens to be in this field. It does not require a college degree. It doesn't require a great deal of study. What it does require is a great deal of confidence and a great sense of knowing that this is, I would say, your calling. So let me refer back to my notes before I get too far off topic. So circling back to my association with ASALH, it came very organically. I think one of the things that you realize once you begin this work is that somehow things fall in place. There's a book that was written some years ago called The Alchemist, and in The Alchemist there's a sense that once you start the path to your journey, things sort of fall into place, whereas the book quotes, there's a conspiracy that things will fall into place on your behalf because you're on the path. This line of work is no different because it is very personal. And as you begin to look and examine the complexity of your family's background, its history, the the many-fold weaving of the ins and outs of how the blending of the families have crossed lines, this, that, and the third, becomes quite interesting. And it's certainly something that you are going to engage truly and discover a great deal. So with ASALH, it was a perfect storm with regards to my growing interest in my own family history, and then my association being asked to come and participate in, I believe it was a luncheon initially with ASALH, and I began to understand that there's an entire community of individuals who have a keen interest in history, not too dissimilar than my own, which is why and how you are here today. So we are all along and going along the same path and journey. But this is a unique opportunity for you to begin to, as I mentioned before, cement your place in your family's history, because this is a calling that you and only you are meant to do. So through ASALH, a tremendous resource, number one. And through this organization, there is a second to none with regards to the body of individuals who are able to help us, myself included, with the research, with being able to access individuals who have information that is pertinent to how we can begin to understand the subject matter that we're going to discuss, or the complexity of how we approach a wide diaspora within our own family background. ASALH is a resource you want to tap into, whether it's through the main chapter here in Washington, D.C., or if you have a branch locally. I would certainly recommend that you stay involved and perhaps look to taking up leadership role in your local branch, because again, the network that exists within ASALH is essential. But getting back to the point, how do you become a videographer historian for yourself? Well, let's take a look at some other points. As I mentioned before, it needs to be something that's personal. There's a sense that if you have a sense of ownership, if you have a sense of responsibility, if you understand that it's more than you, it's the connectivity of your family and the family that's tied to a community and the members of that community that you are a part of, that your family's history is a part of, then there are stories out there that are waiting to be mined, unearthed, or potentially rediscovered. And you ask yourself the question, are those stories important to you? And if so, why? And the frame of mind that you're looking to capture these stories, think about who your audience is going to be. Of course, they'll be members of your own family without a doubt, but thinking that your family is a part of a community, how do the stories of your family's participation within that community help shape what that community is or was? Communities today are changing hand over fist with gentrification, urban sprawl, and the shrinking of our urban neighborhoods. And I worked on a project in the past 2 years with an organization in Washington, D.C., where we examined the oral histories as told by the elders in their community and sat them down with young people, high school age kids, where we were video documenting the passing along of those stories from those elders to those kids, because we're talking 2, 3, or 4 generations removed, where you had segregated communities and kids don't understand what that actually is or would look like. So the passing on of those stories as they shape the history of those communities help to bring about a sense of renewed interest and hope and pride for young people to say that I know Grandpa Jones, who lives down the street, and when he was a kid, he played in this back alley here. The alley now has a Target and some other things there, but when he was a kid, he said it was like this. And so the imagination begins to open, and all kinds of interesting conversations continue to be had between the generations, which all too often today are missing. But your role as a videographer historian potentially has the possibility of helping to bridge those communication gaps between the generations, young and old. Food for thought. Again, why it's personal, why it can be almost a mission for you as you approach your attitude with respect to the work that you're going to be doing. As I mentioned before, my role as a video historian started with my father. And then once I was able to cement the tremendous discovery that I had with my dad, I was mindful of my mother's side of the family. And so I did some digging, and I ended up going down to the heart of South Carolina to the Gullah Nation. Turns out that I am a part and member of the Gullah Nation. My mother's grandmother was full Gullah Geechee from St. Helena Island, South Carolina. And that's a part of the Sea Island chain where the Gullah people lived through the slavery period. And she, my great-grandmother, was a descendant of a woman named Elizabeth Ayres, who was born on the west coast of Africa and brought to the United States shores as an enslaved person. So I am a direct descendant of an enslaved people, African people, and I discovered this on my journey of self-discovery, video documenting my own family's history and story. Again, it's one of those things that when you realize you're a part of it, it becomes a part of you, and the story gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And as much as that was sort of not enough, a few years later, I was reminded of a story that I had neglected to document when I was in college. For those of you who may or may not be familiar with the film, what's the name of the movie? It always escapes me. The Black Mathematicians. What are those ladies' names? Excuse me while I cheat. Go to my computer here. I'm going to cheat really quickly. The name of the NASA math Hidden Figures, that's what it is. It turns out that my grandmother was the lead person in the group of the Hidden Figures, Dorothy Vaughan. Now keep in mind, here is the great tragedy of what can happen if you don't take this work seriously. I lived 20, 30 years with my grandma Vaughan and never thought once to sit down and talk to her about her life story or anything that she did to contribute to NASA and the space race. My brother Kenneth begged me to sit and talk to her when I was in college, and it just went over my head. So, of course, years later, a book is written, a movie is produced, and one of the key figures in the movie is my grandmother, as portrayed in the film. And you realize that you've missed the golden opportunity. I missed a golden opportunity. So whatever interviews I may have been able to attain to this point in my professional and personal life, I will never have another opportunity to interview my grandma Vaughan. It's gone. And that's why I take the work that I do now seriously more than ever, because I do understand as I get older, we're all headed in the same direction. But there are a select few of us that have the capacity and the ability to record those stories of our loved ones, of our relatives. And one of the reasons why I'll say I didn't take it seriously with regards to my grandma Vaughan is because she never talked about her work. She never spoke about anything to do with work to any of the kids, ever. It didn't dawn on me that she was a mathematical genius. It didn't dawn on me that she worked for NASA. Didn't know, didn't register. But it was because other family members had been aware of that and told it to me. But at that time, I had no particular interest in it until much later. So I did have the opportunity to interview Margot Shutterly, who did write the book, Hidden Figures, and I did have a chance to talk to her about my grandmother. And she learned a few things from me, and of course I learned some things from her. But again, it underscores the importance of our role as historians, whether we are lay or professional, and how we can begin to capture the stories that pertain to us personally and our family and our community. So let me go on. And so now we are going to discern, you will discern for yourself how important is this work? What do you want to achieve from this workshop, from this exercise? What do you hope to gain or learn from your experience as a videographer historian? This may be just a moment of time, a chapter in your life that you're going to explore. But if done and done well, which I'm sure you all will do, this will be a living testament, a living testimony to this moment in time that will live forever. We are very fortunate that the work that we are recording today is done digitally. Years ago, it was on film, and film over time degrades. It was on VHS tape. Over time, VHS tapes degrade. We don't have the luxury of always having the opportunity to have this kind of a platform wherein we can easily pick up a phone, pick up an relatively inexpensive camera from our local Best Buy, and then hit the record button. And it's being recorded automatically, digitally, for all time, for storing on a cloud or on a hard drive. Things we'll get to in part 2 of our oral history workshop. But today I'm just trying to underscore for you how important it is for you to think about the long view of the work that you're going to be doing through this exercise, through this program. And so if you have committed yourself to being a part of this, if it has become something that you have determined is personal and something that you are going to commit yourself to, then welcome. This is the space and the place for you here and now today. There is someone that you're going to talk to that needs to be talked to. There is someone you're going to sit down with that probably needed to be sat down with years ago, more than likely. And you'll find this as you continue to discover and pull back layers of your family's history and what they've accomplished and how you have benefited from their work, from their exercises, and from their experiences. I'll offer one more example. And this is not about me showing off regarding my family, because I have nothing to do with what they've done. I'm literally just a student learning of what they've accomplished, providing me with a bit of confidence that I can do it too. I had an Aunt Margaret. She passed away 2 years ago. She was an essential person with respects to the field of education in Virginia. Those of you who may or may not be aware, Virginia was one of the states wherein when they introduced desegregation rather, into the state, there were a number of schools, particularly in Prince Edward County, where the school simply shut down. In fact, my grandma Vaughn taught at one of the schools that shut down as a consequence of a strike that the students had when they realized that the quality of their education was just simply suffering because of segregation. Fast forwarding, my Aunt Margaret came down. She was born and raised in Newport News, Virginia. She received her master's degree, I believe, from Columbia, and she was en route to getting her PhD from Columbia. But she was called into service as an educator of music in the Nottoway County, I believe it was, just outside of Charlottesville. The county could be wrong. When she taught at, I think it was Robert E. Lee High School, 30 plus years as a music teacher. She was the cornerstone of the music program for that school and that area for 3 decades. I was working on a project with the University of Virginia called Teachers in the Movement that focuses on educators who taught before, during, and after segregation in America in 5 different states. I never had the opportunity to interview my Aunt Margaret for that particular program. However, I did sit down with her on several occasions years ago to discuss her life story, her education experience, how it was for her integrating as a Black teacher in an all-white community, and what her attitude was and her approach in dealing with children, learning that kids don't necessarily have, in fact, do not have prejudice when they're born, but it's taught. But reaching kids through education was something that she felt was a universal axiom of truth that she was able to accomplish throughout her career. And in fact, she was celebrated for that, her career, just before her passing, and a grand ceremony that took place in Staunton, Virginia, where she lived her life as an educator. So again, it's personal, and I would encourage you all to consider it a very, very heartfelt, sincere, personal journey for you as you approach this work. Moving down in my notes, what do I have next? Okay, so how do you start the process? I mentioned before, the most important element you need to begin this process is simply confidence. Knowing that you are the one for this task at hand, that no one else can do what you're about to do with regards to the people you're going to talk to and the stories that you're going to document. Why is confidence important? Well, to be quite honest, it can be intimidating. Oftentimes you might get pushback from individuals. They don't want to talk. They're reluctant to talk. They may feel like their story really isn't viable or has value. That's where you come in as someone who not only presents an interest, but also acts as a motivator, assuring him or her or they that their story is vitally important, because there are a growing number of young people coming up behind them that are going to need to hear, need to know, need to see through their eyes and hear with their ears their experiences and learn from them. Again, one of the greatest problems I believe we're facing as a generation today is that there's a gap in communication between our generations, and our young people simply don't have our attention as elders. They're thoroughly distracted through electronic devices and other means of media, where they're just tuned out to what the elders are saying or have to say. And in truth, we're not engaging them in a way where they feel like they're a part of the conversation. We're talking above them, around them, but definitely not talking enough to them. So, having the confidence that your work is valuable and is going to reap great rewards in the future because you're taking the time to do something that no one else has done. And that is going to be a time capsule of wisdom, potentially, that is going to be essential for the generations to come. Those who haven't been born yet are going to want to understand, what was life like then? What were they experiencing then? What was the state of humanity then? The socioeconomic climate then? Racial injustice statistics as they pertain to your area then? This is your moment to capture that through this exercise. And so, with confidence comes what? Work. Homework, specifically. I would advise each and every one of you to consider, what do you need to know going into your oral history conversation, your oral history interview? What do you already know about the person that you're going to be talking to? What do you know about the individuals that you have on your list that you would like to talk to? I'm going to read what I've written down because I thought it was pretty concise. I had a moment of clarity. So do your homework. What can you learn about this person or place before you arrive with your camera? Being confident enough to create the opportunity to have the conversation to start the process. By that I mean, oftentimes you want to coax the individual first. Don't bamboozle them. Let them know that you have an interest in who they are as a person. Let them know that you have an interest in their backstory, where they come from, how they got to be where they are today. Show them that you are truly and genuinely wanting to be engaged with them. That will help build trust and allow the conversation to open to areas that perhaps you were not even expecting. For example, there's a family member that you have. Just start asking questions. Let them know about the interest that you have. And then once you begin the actual process of taking your camera out and pressing record, it's a good exercise to start with the fundamentals, which is tell us, who you are, when you were born, and your parents' names. And from there, I dare suggest that you also ask them, what do you know about your grandparents? Tell me what you recall about your grandparents. This typically is a general rule of thumb when doing oral history interviews with elders. You want to see how far back they can go, how far back they can recall, and individual family members that they can tell you about from their earliest memories. A great-great uncle, a great-great aunt, something unique about their memory that might remind you of someone presently you're living with or perhaps in your own household. So this is the foundation. We want to access actual memories from the individuals with whom we're talking. Oftentimes, we are told stories that have been handed down from one generation to the next. These stories are often the foundation for what we believe to be true, even if there is no actual evidence to validate that those stories are true or where those stories have come from. But they are, in fact, still a part of the lore of our family history. They're a part of the oral tradition that has been a part of Black culture, African American culture, African culture for centuries, millennia even. So for the framework of this conversation, for the framework of this exercise, I want to make sure that we're focusing on what we can glean from our family, familiar situations that have attachments to actual memories, actual events, actual things that took place within the umbrella of the family. So, and may I also throw in that this approach can be held if you're in a professional setting as well. As I mentioned before, I did work with the University of Virginia through the Teachers in the Movement Project. And so if we were at a particular school that had a rich history of one time being an all-white school, and then it was impacted by desegregation, What was it like in those hallways? What teachers did we speak to that could talk to the change that took place once that occurred? How did the atmosphere change? What were the attitudes of the teachers? What were your observations of the students? These are some of the questions that we will ask and have asked our educators or administrators who lived, worked, and saw firsthand what those exercises, those experiences were like. So you always want to make sure that you're getting as much meat as you can with regards to actual, factual history as it was experienced by the individual with whom you were speaking. Very, very important. So let's move on. So we've got confidence, we've got questions, we've gotten our homework, and so now you want to consider when and where. So the when and the where is oftentimes based upon convenience. For example, there's an individual that I have spoken to on numerous occasions. Her name is Miss Smith. She's a Washington, D.C. legend. She was one of two African Americans who were teaching ballet. We're talking high-level ballet in the 1940s and 50s in Washington, D.C. In fact, she had a school, and her school was the school that you went to if you were part of the, I won't say black elite, but if you were part of the black middle class, you did cotillions and things of that nature. You had to learn dance steps, and so you went to her school to learn dances. So I started engaging her in oral history conversation, let's say 4 years ago. Unfortunately, she took ill and is now living in a home, but has impaired speech. But I still go and see her and spend time with her. If I needed to go and see her and speak with her, I would need to make sure that I had permission from the institution. I could bring a camera in and talk to her. Oh, hold on one second. Okay, so where was I? I forgot where I was. Let's see. Oh, so I was discussing location where you intend to film or intend to conduct your oral history preservation conversation. And again, I want to reiterate that it's a conversation that you're having with an individual because you want to create a sense of familiarity and relaxation. You want them to know that they're lovingly speaking to you about aspects of their life that are important to them and are as well important to you, because this is not going to end here, but the story will live on and on and on. So location. Consider where you want to conduct your interview. Oftentimes the home is the most convenient place to go. However, outdoor park, although you cannot really control the outside noise and sound. So I would always recommend shooting indoors, whether it's your home, living room, dining room, or if you have occasion to have access to a space in a home that is a larger home, like a mansion of some sort or an office space. And sometimes even a library. You're able to rent a room in a library or reserve a room in a library, and you can conduct your interview there. And it's always good to be prepared with a list of questions. And do not be afraid to go off script, because oftentimes you're asking a question and somehow they'll mention something that you've never heard before, and it piques your interest. You become extremely curious, and all of a sudden you can't help yourself. Don't fight that urge. These conversations are often about exploring and discovering. We are trying to discover as many things as we can with the short time that we have with the individual that we're talking to. So again, basics. Do your homework, begin there, and then craft questions around your homework. There are things that, for example, you can find in a Wikipedia listing for anybody. However, with that information that you've gathered as your homework, that there's a guarantee that the person that you're talking to is going to give you something that's not listed in that Wikipedia at all. They're going to give you something completely unique that is going to be for the moment that you're in right then and there. And as a good interviewer, we must listen to what our person is saying to us. We must pay attention. The biggest mistake that we can make as the ones conducting the interview is simply to have our list of questions and hit each question one by one by one. That is something that you can't hide the disappointment in that, even in the face of the person with whom you're talking, because they'll provide you with information that leads into an entirely new discussion if you're willing to go there with them. Sometimes it's unconscious, sometimes it is potentially conscious, but if we're not really listening to the people that we're talking to the person in front of us, we're going to miss something. We're going to miss some gold. We're going to miss something potentially amazing, groundbreaking, life-altering. You just never know. So please make sure you're paying attention to the person who's given you this information, who's answering your questions and providing you with insight that you may not have even had a clue about prior to sitting down with them. Very important. Pay attention to the answers that are being given to you. So with your confidence and your homework and your questions, now you're going to be listening. You're out to hear what they have to say and then respond in kind. Remember, it's not just an interview. It's a conversation, like you're sitting down at your kitchen table talking. It needs to be as close to that, as comfortable as that, as humanly possible. That will aid and help you through this process. And more importantly, it'll feel a lot less like work or a chore. When I mentioned at the outset that this is a labor of love, that's the perpetual attitude you need to have when it comes to your approach in doing oral history video documentation. You simply have to be in the right mindset that this is something I want to do, that needs to get done, and I'm the one to do it. Crucially important. So, we've dealt primarily with psychological elements and basic preparatory exercises with regards to getting us into the space where we're going to be conducting the interview. These are the oral history basics from my experience and my standpoint. You want to simply exercise those things, bring with you your confidence, your information that you've gleaned through homework, your ability to ask and listen and reply and respond to what's being shared with you by the individual that you're talking to. And you also want to get a sense of having a feel of where they want to go. What do they really want to discuss or talk about? Or what is it that you have uncovered in your homework that you need them to discuss? What do you need them to really get to the bottom of? I mentioned earlier that we have this thing oftentimes where stories are handed down from generation to generation. Perhaps they know something of these stories and can provide some insight as to where that story came from. Always be mindful that this is your golden opportunity to ask the questions you've always wanted to ask. Going back to my dad. As a kid, I wasn't prepared. I had no confidence to ask my dad questions about his real mom, what it was like being adopted, where the orphanage was, what was it like being an orphaned, how did you feel? I couldn't begin to grasp how to have that conversation with my father as a teenager. However, as an adult, as I approached the threshold of knowing I'm going to go to Germany, I'm going to be doing some serious homework, I need to get my father's blessing in order to be able to see this through. I need to be able to talk to him man to man, son to father, on what it is I hope to accomplish. Know your goal. As you approach these interviews, know what your end goal is and keep that insight the entire way. You need to understand that this is your one opportunity. It may not come again. You don't want to leave it undone. In other words, you want to make sure that you have done your very best, been as thorough as possible to get what it is you came there to get. The conversation, the information, the facts as you can glean them through actual events that took place that these individuals saw, experienced, lived through. These are the goals you need to have at the forefront of your mind and in the back of your mind as you approach this process, start to finish. Set your goal, meet your goal. Get your questions in order, listen, but don't leave any important, vital questions unasked in this process. Too many times I can tell you, I didn't ask this, they passed away, the conversation is never going to happen again. missed. Been there, done that. I'm encouraging you, I'm imploring you to make sure that you are as thorough as possible when it comes to your preparation, your questions, and knowing the ones that you've got to ask and get those answers to as best you can without badgering. You don't want to badger. You want to be loving, you want to be insistent, but you also want to be sensitive to the time, the hour. And that leads to scheduling. So location, determine what's the best location, and then determine, the health, the state of health of the person with whom you're speaking. Are they older? Are they younger? Are they diabetic? Do they have any other health issues? Be mindful of the length of time you intend to spend with them. I would encourage you to always block 45 minutes to an hour. Let them know in advance. I want to take an hour of your time if I can, not too much more, perhaps less. I've got some questions that I want to ask you that are important. Let them know that there is an importance to the exercise of the conversation you're going to be having, that they are going to be vitally important to a greater work that you're going to be producing. And the time that they're going to spend with you is going to be time well spent and not time wasted. But be mindful of the age and the state of health of the individuals that you're talking to. If they're up in years, they won't have the ability to sit as long as a younger person without feeling the need to take a comfort break. These are the small things that you have to be kind of aware of in the back of your mind, depending on who you're talking to, that you want to take into consideration. Likewise, if you do have 1 hour blocked to do your conversation, take breaks every 15 minutes. Allow for that time to rest to come in naturally. That's a help. Make sure that you are showing, expressing, demonstrating a sense of empathy for the individual with whom you're talking to. Equally important. Remember, this is a personal work, not just for you, but for them. And they need to understand and know that while you're there, you're not there for you for selfish sake, for greed or self-centered exercise. You're there to share and to glean and to be in the moment with the individual that you're there to talk to. Important. I can't understate that enough. I can't underscore that enough. Be mindful of the nature, health, state, well-being, or lack thereof of the person with whom you're talking. I can tell you from experience, I've sat down with individuals who are suffering from cancer, terminal. Their time is very limited. And so therefore, you being there with them is crucially important and should not be wasted. And therefore, likewise, you also need to be mindful of their strength, their capacity and ability to maintain the conversation without feeling lost, drained, or just absent in the moment. And finally, I would say that as you approach the work, the exercise, always remain focused. Focus, focus, focus. Remember, it's not about you, it's about them. It's about the message. It's about the history that you're capturing. It's about the history that you're preserving. You are a conduit for future generations. You are an instrument for the children yet to be born. You are the vessel through which your kids, grandkids, neighbors, cousins, third cousins, people you will never know, potentially, will learn something from the work that you are about to do, from the work that you are about to build. This may be your first or your second interview, or it may be your 5th or your 10th. But with each interview, with each exercise, comes a greater institution of the confidence that we spoke of earlier, a greater sense of the importance of what you're doing, helping to be a game changer, a life changer, a change agent when it comes to redirecting the narrative of our story, of our history, particularly of those of us who are of African ancestry. For far too often, and you've heard it before many times, our story has been told to us by others. This is our opportunity, our moment to tell our stories, ourselves, with our own people, sharing that time, sharing those moments, and in all honesty, being very real about it. This is the work that we're called to do. This is part 1 of oral history basics through this exercise that we're doing today. Advanced, part part 2, I will bring to you detailed information as it pertains to the physicality, the logistics, and the mechanics of how to conduct oral histories utilizing your cell phone, your DSLR camera, or a camcorder that you can pick up at any Best Buy or any other shop, Walmart, that won't break the bank, but will provide you with a great return on your investment. So if this work is of interest to you, please come back, join me as I continue to share with you my experiences and how I do what I've been doing for the past decade in helping to document my own life story. Actually, my goodness, that was 2008, losing track of time. 14 years I've been doing this, but it's still, again, because it's a labor of love, as it will be for you, the time will pass quickly. But the footsteps you leave in the sand will be there for your progeny, your future generations to see, and they will appreciate it, as I intend mine to appreciate the work that I've established documenting my family's history. So thank you so much for your time today. I sincerely hope that some of this has been inspiring and informative and provided food for thought as you consider your next steps as you approach video documenting your oral history persons, for the sake of giving all of us an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grow, and an opportunity to understand the depth and richness of how all of our stories are truly interconnected, and we all grow and learn from the sharing of those stories. Thank you for joining